The invitation said 7 p.m. sharp, black tie formal, valet at the east entrance. The guests arrived in clusters, elegant couples stepping out of imported sedans, laughter spilling from the glossy lobby of the Grand Crest Hotel. Flashing cameras caught every dazzling smile, every glittering dress, every pair of designer heels that clicked confidently on marble. Then came her. She stepped out of a simple rideshare, not a luxury town car. Her dress, though elegant, was understated. No entourage, no red carpet pose, no name the photographers recognized. She walked alone. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not loud enough to be rude, but sharp enough to sting. One woman near the entrance whispered, "She came alone to this event?" Another scoffed. "Must have been a mistake on the guest list. Or maybe she's someone's +1 who got here too early." A man chuckled as he adjusted his cufflinks. "Maybe she's PR staff." She didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She just nodded politely and walked inside, past the line of expensive handbags and glinting cufflinks, her head held high. But the judgment followed her. Inside the ballroom, the air was thick with perfume and pride. People greeted one another with air kisses and insincere warmth. Waiters in crisp uniforms passed trays of champagne and caviar. As she moved across the floor, conversation dipped around her, eyes flicking up and down, measuring, dismissing. She approached the table where her name was printed on the place card. A woman seated nearby raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure that's your seat?" She smiled gently. "Yes, it is." Another woman leaned in with a smirk. "I love your confidence. Coming alone to a charity gala like this? Bold." She just folded her napkin and said nothing. The music swelled, the lights dimmed. A voice over the speaker welcomed everyone to the annual Crestheart Foundation Gala, an evening of elegance and generosity. But even as the program began, the whispers around her didn't stop. Who was she? Why was she here? Why did she look so calm? Because they didn't know what she knew. They didn't know the sound that would soon silence every smirk. The low, thunderous whir of helicopter blades approaching from above, and the moment it landed, on the rooftop of the hotel, they would realize exactly who had arrived, and who she truly was. The gala's main program had barely begun when the murmurs turned to full-blown curiosity. More and more guests were glancing toward her table, though pretending not to. She could feel their eyes trailing her every time she lifted a glass or adjusted her chair. It was not envy, at least not yet. It was confusion mixed with judgment. In their world, presence equaled power, and no one could understand how a woman like her had earned a seat at their table. She sat with quiet grace, her hands gently folded in her lap, listening intently to the speeches from the podium. Behind her calm exterior, her mind traveled back to how she and her husband had discussed this very night. He was supposed to arrive with her. They had planned it together weeks ago, laughing over the menu options and making fun of the theme, elegance through the ages. But just that morning he had called from his jet. "I won't make it in time," he had said with regret in his voice. "An emergency board meeting in Milan. I'll try to fly back tonight if I can." She told him not to worry. She was used to this, used to being alone in places filled with people who judged her by what she wore, not what she had built. At the far end of the ballroom, the auctioneer stepped up to the stage. Guests leaned forward as the first luxury item, a rare sapphire necklace, was displayed under soft lighting. Hands shot up with starting bids. Laughter bubbled across tables. Waiters refilled glasses, and still she remained quiet, watching. At her table, a woman in a deep emerald gown turned to her with a half smile. "So, whose guest are you exactly? Or are you just trying to network your way into the elite scene?" She didn't respond right away. She took a sip of water, then met the woman's gaze. "I was invited," she said, "just like you." "But alone?" Another chimed in. "No offense, but you do know this is a couples gala." She nodded. "Yes, I do." The women shared a look, then turned away, smirking. Outside, above the rooftop of the Grand Crest, the first tremors of air stirred. No one noticed it yet. not with their attention so fixed on pearls, paddles, and prestige. The silent hum was still too faint, but it was coming, and with it, everything in that room was about to change. The auction continued, and so did the whispers. She could hear her name spoken in fragments across nearby tables, mangled, questioned, sometimes followed by snickers. One guest openly speculated whether she was someone's assistant, mistakenly seated at the wrong level. Another guessed she might be an influencer, hoping for exposure. To them, her elegance without a label or entourage was a puzzle, and because they could not categorize her, they dismissed her. The host, a tall man in a velvet blazer and polished shoes, strolled past her table and offered a quick, tight-lipped smile. The kind meant more for courtesy than acknowledgement. The lights dimmed again as the next auction item appeared. An exclusive yacht experience in the Amalfi Coast, complete with private chef, crew, and 7-day itinerary. The room erupted into excited chatter. Someone nearby leaned toward her. "Now this would be something your imaginary date could take you on," the woman giggled. "If he ever shows up." She gave no reply. Not because she was weak, but because silence, in moments like this, often spoke. It was subtle but held deep meaning, an anniversary piece engraved inside with the initials of two people who had built an empire together from nothing. She knew she did not need to flash diamonds to prove who she was, but still, the smirks stung. The stage host announced a brief intermission, and guests began rising to network and move between tables. Laughter echoed louder, heels clicked across marble, and camera flashes began to go off as socialites took photos for their profiles and blogs. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, once, then again. Murmurs swept the room. Before confusion could turn into concern, a soft thunder rolled over the glass ceiling of the venue. People paused mid-sentence. A hum, low, powerful, and steadily growing, began to vibrate through the floor. Someone at the window gasped and pointed upward. All heads turned. Above the gala, just beyond the tall glass panes and velvet curtains, a sleek black helicopter hovered, the city lights gleaming off its body. It bore a golden insignia on its side, an eagle with spread wings and a crest that only those in elite business circles recognized immediately. A man leaned forward against the helicopter's window, adjusting the microphone near his lips. Then the doors slid open, and a team of suited security personnel stepped out on the rooftop, clearing space. A spotlight from the roof scanned downward, illuminating the entrance of the gala in shimmering light. And just like that, everything stopped. Every whisper died. Every smirk vanished. The sound of approaching shoes echoed now, not the hurried, insecure kind, but the confident, intentional stride of a man who walked like the world moved aside for him. They had mocked the woman sitting alone. They had wondered who she belonged to. Now they were about to find out. The grand doors at the front of the gala opened with a gentle thud, as if even they knew to move respectfully for who was coming through. A hush fell over the crowd so completely that even the champagne bubbles seemed to pause. A figure emerged, tall, composed, and unmistakably powerful. His black suit was sharp, tailored to perfection, the kind of cut only a few couturiers in the world could craft. His shoes didn't just shine. They reflected the room back at the people who once laughed. It was him. Julian Moretti. The name whispered through the crowd like a shock wave, spreading from one guest to another. The founder of Moretti Global, a billionaire investor whose real estate ventures and international tech portfolio made headlines almost monthly. He wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a force, and the kind of presence that could silence a room before he ever spoke. But it wasn't just his fame that struck the room still. It was where he was heading. Past the hosts, past the most photographed celebrities, past the buyers and their assistants. Without breaking stride, without looking left or right, he walked straight to the woman they had mocked all night. Her. He reached her table with ease, as though the room had widened just for his path. And when he finally stopped, he didn't say anything right away. He simply leaned down, pressed a soft kiss to her cheek, and whispered, "I am sorry I am late." Gasps rippled, murmurs surged, eyes widened. The woman who had been laughed at, ignored, insulted, was not just his date, she was his wife. Julian turned to face the crowd now, placing his hand gently on her shoulder in a gesture that was equal parts protection and pride. "Thank you all for waiting," he said, his voice calm but resonant. "Shall we continue?" The host stumbled forward, flustered. "Yes, of course, Mr. Moretti. We were just about to resume with the yacht experience package." Julian held up a hand to pause him. "Actually," he said coolly, "I have a small adjustment." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check. Then he glanced down at his wife. "Would you like to start the bidding, my love?" She blinked in surprise, but he only smiled, gently, reassuringly, and held the check where the host could see it. It was written out for 10 times the last bid. The room went breathless again. "She'll take it," Julian said, "and we'll donate it to the Children's Hospital in her name." He didn't wait for applause, didn't seek it, but it came anyway, reluctantly at first, then stronger, though not from the ones who had mocked her. No, they stayed quiet, red-faced, awkward, trying to disappear in their gowns and tuxedos. But the applause was real, and for the first time that night, it was entirely hers. She smiled, finally meeting the eyes of those who had doubted her, and this time, they were the ones who looked away. As the applause faded and the spotlight slowly moved away, reality settled over the room like an overdue reckoning. Those who had whispered behind their flutes of champagne now struggled to find the ground beneath their feet. The woman they had scoffed at just an hour ago was no longer just that girl who came alone. She was now the woman whose husband had just outbid an entire room without blinking. But even more than that, she had something none of them could fake. Grace under humiliation, and elegance without the designer label. Julian guided her gently to the front row, where a staff member hurried to clear 2 seats they had earlier refused her. She sat down beside him, composed and quiet, but her silence now carried a different energy. The kind that made people sit up straighter, the kind that made the audience wonder what else they had been wrong about. The rest of the auction continued, but the mood had shifted. Bidders hesitated before raising their paddles, not wanting to seem too eager, too desperate. Hosts who earlier overlooked her now kept sneaking glances her way. Even the fashion influencers who had giggled behind their fans now adjusted their posture and took photos of her under the guise. He didn't overplay his presence. He simply sat by her side, fingers occasionally brushing hers, as though grounding her in the room she now owned. Between bidding rounds, they exchanged quiet comments, smiles, soft laughs, a shared universe between them that no outsider could touch. Eventually, one of the auction directors, a woman in her 50s wearing a velvet blazer and a permanent air of control, approached them. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Moretti," she began, her voice low and careful, "we'd be honored if you would join the advisory committee for our upcoming international gala." The woman blinked. "Me?" "Yes. You clearly have a strong sense of presence and purpose, and with your husband's influence and your own impeccable poise, we believe you'd elevate the entire event." She glanced at Julian, who gave the faintest nod but said nothing. The decision was hers. "I'll consider it," she said simply, her tone level. The woman nodded respectfully and stepped back. But the message had been delivered. They had gone from mocking her for her appearance to inviting her into their inner circle. It wasn't just acceptance, it was recognition. And yet she didn't need their approval anymore. She had already won the moment she stopped shrinking under their judgment. And now they were the ones adjusting themselves to fit into her frame. Behind them, someone whispered, "Who is she, really?" The reply came quietly but clearly. "She's the one none of us saw coming." And with that, the final veil of judgment lifted. The room no longer saw a simple woman. They saw the force behind the billionaire. Later that evening, long after the auction had ended and the guests had drifted away into the night, some humbled, some inspired, all changed in some small way. Julian and his wife sat beneath the open sky on the rooftop terrace of their penthouse suite. The city stretched beneath them, glittering like scattered stars, but neither of them paid much attention to the skyline. Their world, at that moment, was just the two of them. She held a glass of water, not champagne. Simplicity still suited her. The air was quiet, warm, almost intimate, as if the universe itself was giving them space to breathe after the storm of attention and judgment. Julian reached over, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek, his touch tender. "I watched you tonight," he said softly. "Not when they laughed, but when you stood there anyway. You did not flinch. You did not hide. That was the most powerful thing I have ever seen." She looked down at her hands for a moment, then up at him. "I felt small at first," she admitted. "Like I didn't belong, like they had already decided my worth before I even had a chance to speak. But then I remembered something you once told me." He smiled. "That silence is just space waiting for your voice?" She nodded. "Exactly. And when I stood in that room, alone, I realized I wasn't really alone." Julian reached into his pocket, then paused. "You always talk about earning respect on your own. That's one of the first things I loved about you. So tonight wasn't about me showing up to prove your worth. It was about reminding them that you never needed a spotlight to shine." She leaned into him, her voice quiet. "But it still felt good when you walked in. Not because you saved me, but because they finally saw what I already knew." Julian smiled, then handed her a small box. "I was going to give you this after the auction, thought it might feel too showy. But now, I think it's the right moment." She opened the box slowly. Inside was a brooch, delicate, handcrafted, shaped like a phoenix rising, at its center a single gem pulsed with deep, vibrant fire. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's a symbol," he said, "for the woman who rose above judgment, who turned silence into strength, who walked into a room meant to exclude her, and left it transformed." Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had cried once, when they mocked her, when the laughter echoed too loudly, but now there was no sorrow. Only pride, only love. They sat in silence again, but this time it was full of meaning, full of all the things they didn't need to say. Far below them, the venue where the auction had taken place was still lit. But to her, it no longer mattered. That room would remember her, not as a joke, not as an outsider, but as a woman who arrived quietly and left unforgettable.